Yo, what's going down, everyone? How you all doing today? We are Philosophia. My name is Adil, and I'm joined by my co-host.
Uri. And today's discussion will be based on philosophy, and the philosophy idea that we're going to be talking about is a construction by Joseph Campbell, which is known as the hero's journey. It's basically just a series of events which we all go through in our day-to-day life, which we may not actually realize, and it's basically self-development in a way. And you can probably tell that my voice is a lot more croaky than it usually should be, so that's because I'm slightly ill. Just a heads up on that. If I do cough or anything during the podcast, I do apologise. But I was introduced to this concept by my co-host Adil, so I'm just going to pass it over to him so he can describe it in more detail.
So essentially what the hero's journey is that it's a 12 stages monomyth. And what a monomyth is basically a template of a general story arc. So this is something that you see in literally almost every film, book, myths from thousands of years ago. Every story that mankind has created kind of is based off these 12 steps. There's actually 17 stages in the original monomyth, but it's been kind of re-updated and revamped into 12 main stages. So let's get straight into it. So the main one, the first step is the ordinary world. Now this is where the hero, and it can be a hero or a heroine, it doesn't really matter, but obviously when Joseph Campbell wrote it, he kind of did it through a kind of masculine kind of point of view. So the ordinary world is basically the world that the hero lives in before the current story takes place. So let me give you an example. I think it'll be easier if I gave you an example that a lot of you guys know. So let's say Harry Potter. Star Wars is another good example. I'm not really a Star Wars fan. I don't think Ira is either.
No.
So I can't really use that. But Harry Potter, I know I'm quite knowledgeable on that. So Harry Potter. So ordinary world. In the Harry Potter's case, that's where he's living with his uncle and aunt. So that kind of everyday life that he has, nothing special, status quo, nothing's really happening, and this is kind of the life he's been living before we've been introduced to him and the current story. So that's the first step. The second step is the call to adventure. Now this is where something in the hero's life is calling him to action. So in the Harry Potter case, it's Hagrid when he comes and he says, "Harry, you're a wizard, Harry." And
You're a wizard, Harry.
You're a wizard, Harry. That's his call to action. And so in our lives, if you want to kind of relate it to our life, it could be anything. It could be like a something that's threatening your current life, or it could simply be that you're bored. I know Buddha, the story of Buddha, his call to action is just him being bored.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you have any examples in your own life of like a call to action or something that people might relate to.
To be fair, I think what it is it's quite a subconscious thing, isn't it? This cycle. So, I mean, being put on the spot, I'm not too sure if I do have any that I can think of. But I think the second stage, so the call to adventure, I have a cycle here which I'm looking at. Is very much when you become aware of a problem or aware of a situation, and it sort of manifests itself, and you realise that you need to do something about it. I think that's what the two first steps are. So there's limited awareness of problem from what you're describing, and then you become aware to it in the second stage.
Yeah. I think that's a good way of wording it. So yeah, the call to action is basically something that kind of disrupts the peace of your ordinary world.
So there's almost a routine,
and
then something happens to make you go out of that routine and think about something in a different way, which was brought to it wasn't in your mind prior to the call to adventure stage, which is the second step.
Yeah, and I mean, just a random example for us, kind of basing off our last video, is our call to action might have been, university applications and A-level exams and all that. That's kind of like our call to action of a new stage, kind of breaking from the routine. So those are the first two steps: ordinary world and call to action. Now the third step is the refusal of the call to action. And you see this quite a lot in a lot of stories where the protagonist or the hero, they kind of, for whatever reason, it might be they have doubts about their ability, they might have second thoughts, but there's initial resistance to the call to action. the ordinary world they're used to might be the more attractive option. I think this part kind of resonates with a lot of us in our everyday life. It's where you're kind of comfortable in your comfort zone. A lot of people, they kind of try to go about life where it's very comfortable. It's a well-trodden path. They go along the way where there's least amount of discomfort,
risk,
and the least amount of risk.
So it's almost like at this stage you have to choose between being an entrepreneur and not. If you want to take the risk, or if you don't want to take the risk. If you want to go forward, if you don't want to go forward. Yeah,
so that's one example. The ordinary world might be you being employed, a 9-to-5 job, and then the call to adventure might be you starting your own business.
Exactly. And
a lot of people refuse that call to adventure. We're not saying, being an entrepreneur is like the highest purpose in life, but that's just like one example.
That's one example, and I'm not wrong to say that this is where most people stop, isn't it? So, a lot of people, when they do get to the stage, like Adil said, they prefer to remain in the comfort, in the comfort zone, as opposed to moving out and just taking a risk, like we said. And we might not be conscious of it. Again, it is a subconscious thing. It's a cycle. We might not go through all the steps, but at this stage, a lot of people may refuse subconsciously going forward. They might refuse going forward.
Yeah. So I think this is quite a critical point, because this is where a lot of us stumble in life. A lot of us stumble in terms of we always regress back into that comfort zone.
Yeah.
So those are the first 3 steps. The 4th step is meeting a mentor. Now this is it could be literally, we could have a whole podcast on this one stage.
Mentor,
And relating it back to the Harry Potter example, that's kind of like Dumbledore for Harry Potter. That was his mentor. And obviously in films and books and stories, it is quite a literal mentor, because that's just easy for the audience to digest. But I think in real life, as I think Eri would know, mentor could literally be anything. It could be, it's really a metaphorical kind of...
Yeah, I think the whole cycle itself is a metaphor, isn't it? Because it can be like a long-term plan, or it can be just day-to-day stuff that we experience, that we need to go through this cycle. And I think the meeting the mentor stage, like Adil said, it can be anything. It is genuinely a metaphor, so it can be an actual physical being. It can be an idol from the past, or a fictional character. It can be anything.
It could be books.
It can be physical, or it can just be ideologies, and all this kind of stuff are what influence us to... they're the stuff that influence us to then make a decision to go on to the next stage, and we learn from our mentors. And I think that is why it is so important, because without the mentors, I don't think we would know as much about where to take ourselves.
Yeah. I think having a mentor in life, it is kind of going off a bit of the cycle, but having a mentor in life, I think, is a really underappreciated aspect of fulfilling a purpose in life. I think we all do need a mentor in some shape or form to kind of guide us.
Yeah, I think like there's a lot of different mentors in our life. So we might not be about, obviously our parents will be mentors, our lecturers mentors. So that because this cycle is applicable to most situations that we face, you have a lot of different mentors. But I think there are specific ones that do change us massively. So it can be beliefs, like we said, or it can be events. That's a massive mentor, isn't it? So learning from something,
from an experience,
that can also be a mentor. So personally, I felt like once I started watching panel shows. So panel shows was a mentor to me, because watching comedians, I learned a lot from them. I don't know why, but they taught me a lot. I don't know who your mentors are, but that's the kind of stuff that I used to learn a lot from. I used to learn a lot from just A-levels, so history. And I learn a lot from people in general. People are my mentors. Just day-to-day interactions with friends teach me a lot. And I don't know, what would you say your mentors are?
So yeah, I think you hit quite a good spot there with the whole panel show thing, because I think mentors, a lot of it is quite subconscious as well. Something where you witness someone or something behaving in a certain way, and that kind of influences you. And that's kind of a example of a mentor. So for me, I think I read quite a lot of books by like the self-help kind of books. And I think the authors, they're my mentors, people that I haven't even met or, are dead right now. They've affected me in such a way that I can consider them as a mentor. So I think that is really, it's kind of breaks the stereotype of having someone like, like a personal trainer, and you would think that's kind of like a mentor or like your advisor.
Yeah.
I think that's the examples that a lot of people have when you say the word mentor.
Yeah, I think some people might find it synonymous with like idols or people who inspire you, but it's definitely not that. It's just anything that basically makes you change the way you think, change the way you are, not in a negative or positive way. It can change you in any way, shape or form, but as long as you do develop from it, and as long as you do sort of show progress, I think that's what a mentor is really, isn't it? So anything that you genuinely learn from could be a mentor.
I think, so like, books, like I said, I watched a lot of YouTube videos, so a lot of YouTubers that kind of talk about these kind of like philosophical or even like motivational speakers. I don't know if you've heard of Eric Thomas.
I haven't, no.
He's a really good motivational speaker. I think he's quite a big mentor. I've never met the man. I would hope to go to like an event of his in the future, but I would say he's been quite a mentor in my life. So it could literally be anything that's influenced you or change the way you think. So I think that is quite a big aspect.
And it doesn't always have to be people who demonstrate things in a positive way. So it could just be people who you learn not to be like, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's quite good.
So you could see someone as a mentor who you look at and think, I don't want to be like this person. And they can also be a mentor to you. So a mentor doesn't have to be anyone who is perfect.
Yeah.
If we're speaking in terms of idols, but if we just look at someone and we think we don't want to be like this person, you still learn from them. You still learn how to be from them, and therefore that can also be a mentor to you.
Yeah. So just to recap the steps we've gone through: first step is the ordinary world. The second step is the call to adventure. The third step is the refusal of this call. And then the fourth step is meeting the mentor. So like we said, it's meeting someone, something, reading something, watching something that kind of removes the doubts that you had when you refused that call, or the protagonist. Normally meeting the mentor kind of provides kind of either wisdom, knowledge, it could be confidence that kind of removes the restrictions that the hero had for them then to move on to the next step, which is crossing the threshold. So this is where they accept whatever it is that they have to do. They accept their purpose in life, and then they've crossed that line. So now they're in the thick of it. They've committed to whatever their event or the purpose is. So that's 5 steps. The sixth step is where the tests, the allies, the enemies. This is kind of like the meat and potatoes of the story, usually in most films and books and stuff, is where the protagonist gets obstacles. It could be hurdles, it could be other people, and this is where his skills and his determination is tested. Basically, it's the trials, and every time he overcomes an obstacle, he grows. He grows as a person. He gains new skills. So, for us, it could be exams. It could be, arguments with other people. It could be, trials, auditions, stuff like that. I'm trying to kind of relate it to the modern world.
Is it like conflict, basically?
Yeah, it's basically conflict. Some sort of resistance that the hero faces, where then when they overcome it, they've grown as a person.
I mean, is there an example of that in Harry Potter?
In Harry Potter, it could generally be, I don't know, like the Quidditch match he has in the first Harry Potter film is basically where, he has to overcome the obstacle, which is winning the Quidditch match. So, that's a random example. I just thought on the top of my head. There's probably better examples. But, this is kind of like, where the main story is, where, there's a lot of trials and a lot of action and all that. So that's the 6th step. Now, the 7th step is the approach to the inmost cave. Now, this is quite a metaphorical name for it, but what it essentially means is this is the precursor to when the hero is going to now approach that main boss kind of boss level, like in a game where you have the main boss level, and then this step is basically the final preparations to facing, and it doesn't have to be like a literal kind of monster. It could be like an inner conflict or like an inner fear that you need to now overcome. Like it's basically something that's huge, that's major, that's drastically going to change the hero.
Yeah.
So that's the 7th step. Now the 8th step is called ordeal. Now this is this is kind of like the high point of the hero's story. So this is where they face that inner conflict, or they face that demon or that monster, you know, and this is where everything's on the line now. You know, if they don't defeat this thing, then they might go back all the way to square one.
Yeah.
Or they might even go further back.
So it's like all or nothing, basically.
It's the all or nothing. So for us, it was kind of like the A-level exams or something like that.
Yeah.
It was where, you know, this is the high point of that stage of our life.
Yeah.
And so for Harry Potter, I'd say in the first film, it's where he faces the I don't know what the professor's called, but the professor with the Voldemort on the back of his head, that guy. That's basically his ordeal for that first film, and that's the one where, you know, it's the biggest challenge he's ever faced. This step is basically the biggest challenge, something that the hero has never come across before, and now he has to use all the newfound skills he's gained, all the newfound experience, to then defeat this foe or, you know, conflict or whatever.
So is it almost like an application of the experience gained from step 7 and 8? So it's almost like you sort of learn
from the trials and tribulations before.
I want to make an analogy. Maybe I'm wrong on this. So is it almost like a vaccination? So stage 7 and 8 stage 6 and 7 is almost like where you get like a small dose of it, where like you fight the smaller versions of this one specific attack almost, and then once you get to the bigger step, if the vaccination is effective, you won't feel the impact of stage 8 as much as you should.
Yeah.
Whereas step 6 and 7, if step 6 and 7 aren't as effective as they should be, then you obviously feel stage 8 in the worst way possible. Yeah,
I mean, I guess that's one way of looking at it. You know, I never even thought about that. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, I don't know if you guys if you guys play games out there, but it's kind of like, you know, when you fight all the little enemies and then you come across the boss level. So that's kind of basically what it is. And this is kind of the part where the hero goes through death and then rebirth. They're reborn into a new person, if that makes sense. Kind of like a metaphorical rebirth.
Metaphorical, yeah.
Where their old self dies and then they are reborn as a new person.
Is it like an experience? So obviously, because it's a metaphorical cycle, it can be anything from actual fight to just inner struggles.
Yeah.
So is this very much just the stage where you become a different person, where it changes you so much that you are no longer what you were prior to this specific stage?
Okay. This is the part where, you know, I think something that we could talk about is kind of like depression. You know, if someone goes through depression and they overcome that depression, they're never going to be the same person again. They're gonna be grown as a new person.
They're going to be a lot more stronger.
A lot more stronger. Or you know, if you suffer from kind of like an unfortunate event, you know, if someone in your family died, or, you know, if you failed an exam, and then you persevere, or, you know, you kind of try and recover from that, you're kind of dying from the old self and reborning into a new, stronger self.
Yeah, because it's basically a situation which you're confronted with that you have no idea previously. So you never experienced the same emotions or the same situation before,
or you have, but not in that magnitude.
Not in that magnitude, yeah. So, but after this stage, it's like you said, in comparing it to the games, it's the biggest step of it. And after this stage, you definitely learn the most from the cycle. Yeah.
So kind of going back to the whole like an unfortunate event. I mean, we have a choice basically. In this stage, we have a choice to either let that unfortunate event break us, or let it help us form into a new person. Yeah. So I mean, another example, just to help you guys understand, is kind of like the whole concept of working out. You know, a gym, exercise, or whatever. When you work out, what you're basically doing is you're breaking down your muscle cells. You're putting them under stress, and every time you increase the weight, you're putting them under new stress, and they break down.
Yeah.
And then when you re-nourish yourself and go back to the gym, what you're basically doing is rebuilding those muscle cells. And now, because you've broken them down and then re-nourished them, now they're stronger, and now they can, that same weight that you broke them with, Now they can, it's nothing.
They can undergo more.
They can
stress.
undergo more stress, and then you increase the weight and all that. So that's kind of like another example.
It's comparable to any situation.
Yeah.
It really is. Even like exams, obviously, that's something that so you have the mocks, which are like the smaller versions, and then you get to the exam, and when you get to the exam, you can either go all out and revise completely, or you can just like go, if I fail, I'll fail anyway, and then you go back to the start. So if you like repeat a year at A level, then I guess that's sort of going back to the start, isn't it? So you get to the end point, but at the end point you don't do as well as what you can do, and then that causes you to go back to the start of the cycle where you need to go through all of these small steps again.
And it's not necessarily a bad thing to go back to the cycle, because obviously in the film, or in Harry Potter, let's say for the first film, obviously he defeats the villain and he succeeds. In a lot of films and media and stories, they obviously win, and it's kind of like all honky-dory and everything. But as we know in life, it's not always that's not always the case. And it's not like this is kind of a linear cycle. Obviously, it's very convoluted. You can go. It's like snakes and ladders, really. When you play snakes and ladders, you go up the ladder, and then 2 steps later, you come back down. You find a snake and you come back down.
So you might miss out steps. You might add extra steps. You might spend longer time on certain steps. Because we can't emphasize it enough, really, because it is genuinely subconscious. This cycle is subconscious, and the more you read into it, which I will advise, because I think it is. We compared it to sort of fictional characters most, but when you actually look at the cycle, unintentionally, this is what we all do. Like, this is the kind of events that we follow. This is the pathway that we go through when we do become better at things. And I think that's why it's quite good. The cycle is good is quite an under exaggerated compliment for Joseph Campbell's intellect, but I think this definitely does sort of represent what we all go through.
Yeah. And you will see it in in everything, literally everything. Like we said, Star Wars, Harry Potter, Buddha, Jesus, every like kind of story about mankind kind of goes through this whole template. And obviously it's not exact, but you can definitely relate a lot of stories.
I mean, think of any film, really. Actually, we should talk about that when we get to the end, because once we get to the end, then you can compare the whole thing, can't you? Yeah. So that's when we should draw comparisons to.
All right, so let's move on. Yeah, let's move on to the 9th step. So the 9th step is it's called reward, or seizing the sword. So this is kind of the aftermath of the hero defeating or overcoming the ordeal, and now they're in a new state. And they're a stronger person, and normally they get a prize, some sort of prize. Now, seizing the sword is obviously kind of a literal thing, like in the Greek days, they will get like a sword, and that will be their prize, or like a weapon or something. But it could literally be anything. It could be an object like a sword, or it could just be newfound wisdom, or a new relationship, or forming old relationships again. It could literally be just anything that the hero gains from overcoming that ordeal.
Almost anything that you can take from it, whether that's knowledge, whether that's knowing what to do when you're in that situation again. So anything that can be related to positive gains from the first 9 steps of the cycle.
Yeah. So yeah, that's reward. Now the 10th step is called return to ordinary world. Now this, from here onwards in the hero's journey, it does differ. This is where a lot of variation can happen in terms of different stories. They kind of do deviate normally at this stage. So the past kind of like 9 stages is quite standard, a format of a lot of films. So the 10th stage is return to ordinary world. Now this is basically where, now being this new person, in a new state and newfound wisdom, the hero returns back to the ordinary world that they were in step 1. And I don't think it's really the case now in modern stories, but back in like Greek mythology and the ancient times, a lot of the stories, like in modern times, the end game is normally where, they defeat the villain, and then, I don't know, they get the girl or they get the promotion or whatever, and that's the end game. if you if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So a lot of modern stories are like that, but back in like ancient times, the end game was really the hero's journey back home. That was kind of more of the end game, because a lot of the time, what you find is when you are a new person. I think anyone can relate to this into their own life. When you grow as a person, and you try to return back to that ordinary world, you will find some resistance.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. So like when you do develop because of a certain event, and you sort of have almost different interests, different way of thinking, different way of doing things, and when you go back to the sort of group or the community or the environment that you were in previously, you sort of struggle because like. Like the promotion thing, for example. Say you work really hard and then you get promoted to being a manager, and you have to manage a group of people. A group of people who you used to be colleagues with. Their opinion on you is going to be different because now you're a manager, right?
Yeah.
And that's the kind of stuff you can compare it to. I mean, that's a basic example, but that is the kind of stuff you cannot mold with the group like you did before because you've changed.
Because you've changed. Yeah, and especially with people, it's kind of there's the thing with just us as humans in our nature, we like to categorize things. And we do this for people as well, we do this for objects and everything else. Literally everything in life we like to categorize. So when you know someone, you've kind of subconsciously categorized them into like a certain box. And they're in that box. In your mind, they're in that box. And you see them as always being in that box. Now, when they grow as a person, you might find that they're out of that box now.
Yeah.
And you you don't like that.
You struggle to adapt, don't you? Because previously you had such a
preconception about that person.
Yeah, you had like a stern image as to what their character was like. And once they do show change, whether it's positive or negative, like you might accept it if they're negative, you might accept it if they're positive, but depending on how they change, the idea that you have of them is no longer the same, and therefore you need to find a way of like you might accept them again, but you need to find adapting to them because they've changed. They're not the same person.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is obviously the choice of the individual. So now they can either try and force them back into that box. And that's basically where the resistance comes from, where where you get like haters and all that, because now you're just someone that they want you in that box, if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, and we're talking about the resistant now. We're not talking about the person who's in the cycle. We're talking about the people who are causing that friction of the comfortable journey back into where they came from.
Yeah. So they can either try and force you back into that box, and that usually never works. Or if they're kind of stronger as a person, not to like throw shade at anyone, but if they're a self-aware individual themselves, they'll create a new box for you.
Yeah.
But what you do see is we as humans like to put everything in boxes, and even other people in boxes.
A lot of people don't enjoy change, do they? They want things to be consistent.
They want things to be, and it's just human nature, really. It's not really a bad thing, but it's just our responsibility to kind of be aware of that and kind of adapt as people. Alright, so like I said before, these last steps do vary when it comes to films and media and different stories. So the 11th step after this return to the ordinary world is resurrection. Now this is kind of like in the grand scheme of things. So in the Harry Potter case, it's where he finally faces Voldemort in the last film. And in Harry Potter's case, actually, I've just realised it's quite literal. He does kind of he kind of dies, and then he meets Dumbledore in like, I still don't get it really, but he meets Dumbledore in like the afterlife kind of thing, and then he resurrects. And so in that case it's quite literal, but it is generally a metaphorical sense where this is the final dangerous encounter where
it's the last minute changer. Yeah. This cycle says it's the last minute changer. So it's like the cherry on the icing. There we go.
It's basically where it's now kind of like a challenge that now you have to face as a grown person. So maybe before you would have been completely destroyed by this challenge, But now that you've gone through the ordeal in the last in one of the steps before, and you're now a new state, now you're facing this even bigger challenge, and this is kind of like a massive. This has massive consequences normally when it comes to the hero. It either affects the people back at home in their ordinary life, or it affects them. You might destroy if they lose this. You might destroy them. Generally in stories, it's kind of like the end of the world kind of thing, where if they lose, it's the end of the world and all that, and everyone dies and all that jolly good stuff. So this is resurrection, and this is where you metaphorically again rebirth into that kind of new state again. And so the last step is step 12, which is return with the elixir. And what this means is, again, this is quite a metaphorical name for it, but this is basically where you return. Now you finally do return to the ordinary world, or that back home. In our case, it's kind of like when we finish our degree and we come back home.
We now have that solution.
We now have that kind of qualification, that new wisdom, that new knowledge that we have. And
to tackle life almost. So up until that point, there's been like sort of miniature examples where we've had to do serious things and make serious decisions, and we've been put through serious struggles. However, going back home and setting up the rest of your life with your degree, I guess that's the final step where you are able to go back and you have this thing in your hand, which for us will be literal. This thing in your hand, which will allow you to tackle any other solution, any other problems that you may face thereon. Yeah,
and that's what it means by return of the elixir. You have some sort of gift to give to the people, or you've basically gained something, and now you have it, and you return back, and now you can share it. So it could be, knowledge, wisdom. You've basically grown as a person. I think I've said that so many times.
For every step, see, I guess that's the whole point of this cycle. For every step, there is development.
Yeah.
But this final stage is when you can literally have, whether it's knowledge, whether it's anything, but this literal thing that you are consciously aware of that makes you better. Like this thing that basically makes you have a solution to any. If you were to go through this cycle again, you know exactly what you need to do with this thing that you have in your hand. And that's why you have said you learn from every step, because you do learn from every step.
Because I don't want to sound like a broken record here,
but
it honestly genuinely is. Every time, most of the steps, if not every step, is where you grow as a person.
Yeah.
And in the Harry Potter case, this is basically where he defeated Voldemort, and now he's gained that kind of status as the chosen one kind of thing. And now he has kids and everything, and now he can give that elixir, give that gift of knowledge and wisdom and experience to his children. And I think, especially for us in our real life, this is kind of like where you become like the old man with the wisdom, with the wise knowledge. This is kind of like where now you can be a mentor to someone else.
Yeah. See, it's funny though, we associate like mentors with just older people.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
But I think as long as you, because what I see when I look at this cycle is just like a way of self-development in every stage. And I personally believe that even though we do this subconsciously, I think if we did bring this to our conscious way of thinking, we would be able to learn more from it.
Yeah.
Because we would think, okay, I'm confronted with this situation. What I need to do now is tackle it in the most effective way possible, and then learn as much as I can. So then what I can do, not only do I now have this elixir, which is a solution, but like you said, you can then also pass that on to people.
Yeah. And
that's why, so we said that we would leave comparing this to films at the end. The film that I can compare it to is Django Unchained, which is a film that I love. So Django is confronted with a problem, which is he's like, he gets separated from his wife. Obviously he's a slave, but he's also away from his wife. His mentor is Dr. Schultz. So if anyone watches the film, you know how important Dr. Schultz is. He teaches him how to use a rifle. He teaches him how to be, in those days, a white person, even though he is black. And then he goes through a like series of bounty hunting where he gets to meet the bad guys, and then eventually he gets to meet the baddest guy, which is in the film it's Leonardo DiCaprio, who is known as Monsieur Candide. And then afterwards, what he does is he resurrects and goes back into this into the community that he used to belong to, which is sort of black, the black community in America, but he's there in the black community as a black man, but he's no longer a slave.
Yeah.
So there is resistance because people are jealous that they do not have the liberty that he does.
Yeah.
And that's why he struggles to go back in. But then, obviously, if he does have this elixir, which is how to sort of become white, which is, I know that's a very, horrible thing to say, but that is what it was in those days. When you were white, you were more educated, you had more privileges. And he became like those people. He became free. And when you have that elixir, you can then show that to people and you can go, look, this is how you do it. This is what I've done.
Yeah.
And if you learn in the way that I do, then you might also be in this situation. And when he is confronted with the situation, so when he is confronted with racism, he knows what to say now. He knows what to do now.
Yeah.
And I think Django, if you actually look at the whole film, it very much satisfies every single step of this cycle.
Yeah.
Have you actually seen the film Django?
No, I haven't actually seen Django. I have heard of it. I've heard it's a
film.
really good film.
It's
though.
a really good film.
Yeah.
I learned a lot about. And yeah, I think mentors, I can't really emphasize the importance of mentors. That's my personal opinion. But if anyone was looking for an example as to how this cycle does affect characters that we can actually know and we do actually know, that's one that I would like to compare it to, because I really like the film Django, and I really like the film.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good example. Yeah. So, I mean, that's just one of many, to be honest. Literally every single film or every single
The
book.
Matrix, like you mentioned, Buddha, Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, all of that. Spider-Man, Avengers, literally everything. Yeah,
literally everything.
If you guys have heard of these examples before, it's probably if you've heard of this cycle before and you've watched the videos on YouTube. So Elliot Hulse, that's the guy. So he mentions these, but if you look at the videos, there are like set examples that a lot of people know, such as the ones that we've mentioned. So we're not repeating it. We're just like going into more detail about these points and using the examples that we can all relate to. Yeah.
I mean, like big example like the Star Wars. I know Luke Skywalker is like the main person, and then his mentors are like Obi-Wan Kenobi and like Yoda, and then his ordeal is kind of like Darth Vader and the Empire and all that. So that's kind of like just another example.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's really is when you think about it, it really is crazy how much this kind of monomyth does affect us. And I think the main thing we want to get across here is the fact that it really does relate to us and in everyday life. Yes, it's all nice to talk about how it's in every single fictional thing, but the reason why it's in every single fictional piece is because it's something that every one of us as a human being can resonate with, and that's basically what fictional pieces try to do. They try to resonate with the audience.
Yeah.
And because this hero's journey is so prevalent in our everyday life, we can automatically just resonate with it.
Yeah.
And it's just something that, honestly, if you do become more aware to it, you can really utilize it.
I mean, I don't feel like people should think that they have to follow this kind of stuff, because as long as I think the main message of the cycle is learning from mistakes or learning from people, learning from the stuff that you do. I think it's a 12-step cycle, but the most important thing is it's making mistakes and learning from those mistakes. I think that's one thing that people are afraid of doing. So we talked about stage 3, refusal of cool, right? So if you were to be an entrepreneur and you don't want to take that risk, then what you're doing essentially is you are scared of making mistakes. You're afraid of the rest of the cycle. So you're afraid almost of being defeated. And when you think of our lives, if we were to always remain in our comfort zone and stay in our shell, then at what point are we going to learn from things?
Yeah.
So, like uni, for example, that was our call to adventure. That most people can relate to. So if you've seen our first podcast, then you can probably relate to this as well. Our call to adventure was coming to university. See, what we could have done is we could have just gone out there and worked full time or stayed at home and do whatever. But now we have come to uni, we're making more mistakes, we're learning more. There's like small challenges and then bigger challenges, and then going back after you've learned from those challenges, you meet new people, and then you learn from those people, and you can't go back to the previous group of people that you were around. So there's so many examples that we can use, but that's why it's important for this refusal of call to not be a barrier.
Yeah.
Because once it does become a barrier, you're almost afraid of being defeated. I mean, I can admit, I'm a very sore loser. I hate losing. But I'm not afraid of losing when it comes to self-development. When you are learning from things, and even though it means you make a mistake in the first place, if you learn from it, then that's not a massive problem, because you become a better person out of it. Therefore, you take, after this stage, if you've been through this stage, if you've been through the cycle once, you almost take any challenges there are with a pinch of salt.
Yeah, exactly.
You think, I've been through this before. So, I don't know, it can be like breakups. Like if you have a girlfriend and you break up with a girlfriend, if you've had a few, then the first time, obviously, it's going to be significantly detrimental to your well-being in general, and then the second time it will be, and then the third time you think, look, I've been through this before, I know how to act, I know what to do. And that's just one example, and I think that's what it is. I think the whole cycle is just a metaphor for self-development and making mistakes and learning from those mistakes, because mistakes essentially are what make us what we are today. We can't be perfect human beings from birth.
I mean, that's what human beings are. They're imperfect beings.
Exactly.
I mean, that's what makes us human. I think, that is a really big concept to hit home, or a big point to hit home. It's the fact that a lot of us have this kind of linear image of success, from A to B. But a lot of the time, it's, I'm sure you guys have seen it on like Twitter and stuff. Those images of how success is like a zigzag line, and like it's like snakes and ladders.
Quite cliche stuff that we sort of
like,
indoctrinate
I get it. I'm not gonna be successful straight away. But I think we really do need to internalize the concept of failing, and kind of sometimes even looking for those failures. Because when you do fail, that is the biggest teacher. I mean,
exactly.
It's just it's such a thing where a lot of us are so afraid to fail that we don't do anything.
Yeah, I agree, and I think the mentor part. I think the mentor can be bad as well as it can be good, because if you become over dependent on the mentor, you can't. You think, okay, I had this person with me when I was going through the struggle, but now they're not here. I don't know how to be when they're not here with me. And I think that's one thing that we need to make sure we look out for. So this mentor, it's all, say like you're suffering from something and you want to talk to your friends about it, and sometimes your friends may not be there for you, but then when you can't talk to them about it, you can't go through this cycle, and you rely on your mentors in order to go through this cycle. As important as the mentor is, we shouldn't be completely dependent on those kinds of people in order to develop ourselves. We should sort of know how to go through this independently, and I think that's another massive thing. So what we think is we can only go through certain things with the help of people, but sometimes we need to sort of go through this cycle on our own, because we need to be independent, and independence is, for me anyway, in this cycle, it's synonymous with being stronger, because the more you do independently, the stronger you'll be independently, and the less you'll need to feel the comfort of people around you in order to make mistakes. So if you are suffering from something, then you obviously need people there. But once you become too reliant on your friends, when they're not there for you, that's when you become significantly disappointed, and that could upset you more than talking to them if they were there. And I think that's why mentors can be just as bad as they can be good.
I think that step in general is such a massive
I agree.
massive thing, because it's not like a one-off thing as well. It's just constant. Every day you're influenced by mentors. And back to the case of like being afraid to fail and stuff. It's kind of like where when you fail, you learn from it. Obviously, you hear all of that stuff, but when you fail, it's kind of it's something where it's kind of essential to success, if that makes sense.
Yep.
And I know you hear that all the time. Yes, you need to fail to succeed. But I think a lot of us, because of that fear to fail, we always stay in our comfort zone.
Yeah.
And you always hear the quote, growth is outside of the comfort zone. But I think not a lot of us actually internalize that. A lot of us think, I will, one day I'll, kind of do this and do that. Like one day, I thought maybe a few years ago, one day I'll start a podcast.
Yeah.
But for now, I'm going to stay in my comfort zone.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to be judged, or I don't want to be...
Yeah, that's exactly...
I don't want to make mistakes making podcasts. I don't want to seem like an idiot. I don't want to be judged by my friends. I don't want to be all of that. So I stayed in that comfort zone.
Yeah. I think that's quite important, what you said, because you sometimes are afraid of, like... So in our case, I've also wanted to, record podcasts for a long time, but I've only now got the courage to do it because I felt like previously there would be certain people who would judge, there would be negative comments, but now I'm thinking, no, that's something that I want to take. I want to develop myself. I want to, by talking, I want to develop my speaking skills, my thinking skills, and I'm taking that everything that is said in a positive way, and I'm not affected by it. And I think one thing that we need to make sure that we avoid. So there's two sides of the coin. There's either you don't want to make mistakes at all and you stay in your comfort zone, or you become so into this cycle that you are not self-aware anymore. You think, okay, I can make as many mistakes as I want and not feel like, because I'm learning from it, that's fine. I can make mistakes.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Do you get what I mean?
Yeah, I get what you mean.
So it's like you like using the analogy of the double-edged sword. I think this is a double-edged sword. Staying always in your comfort zone, even though for you that might be good, but you never actually show progress, or you show progress at a slow speed. Whereas if you're going through this cycle so much that you're not benefiting from it and you're not learning, and you just keep making mistakes and you don't learn from it, then that can also be just as bad.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. I mean, it's always about that happy medium, isn't it?
Yeah, happy medium.
Just with everything, it's always about that happy medium. There's always going to be polar opposites, and you want to find yourself in that happy medium. So, yeah, I mean, it's all subjective as well. It all just depends on your personality and your life and what you find is your purpose in life. And sometimes failure is, or most of the time, failure is going to be part of it. And I think one of the quotes, Joseph, I've got it up here, that Joseph Campbell himself said after constructing this monomyth, is he said in his words, "The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek."
Yeah.
So, I think that kind of just describes it perfectly, really. For a lot of us, we have insecurities, we have fears, and we know about them, but we always stay in the comfort zone because it's just easier. It's not, we're not trying to say is you're bad human for staying in your comfort zone. No, you're just human, because we all just like to be in the comfort zone. We all like to just be comfortable in life, but that cave. And that cave can be fears you have. That cave can be an exam. That cave can be like an audition or tryout.
Money, wealth.
That cave can be an interview.
Success, anything.
Anything. That cave that you fear, that is inside that cave. That's where true growth and true purpose in life is.
That's where, essentially, step 9 is. That's where the reward is.
That's where the reward... Exactly. That's where the sword in the stone, or whatever you want to say.
Exactly.
So that's where it is.
It's actually crazy, because the cycle makes a lot of sense, but then there's a lot of things that can go wrong, and a lot of things can be just as bad. So if you don't go into the cycle, then you're in your ordinary world. But if you go to step 8, where you have to go through the actual true ordeal, and then you have to die and then be reborn, metaphorically, then if you cannot pass that stage, then you go back to square one.
Yeah.
And you can start... It's like hyperpolarization. Action potentials.
Yeah, I think you can tell he loves to
I love my science. Yeah,
he loves his science.
But yeah, it's almost like the hyperpolarization. You start further back from where you were, and I personally think that would probably be worse. I think the most important thing is just you learn from this, obviously, but just calculating the things that you do, just like learning. Just being sensible about it. Like
back to the gym example, you want to be sensible about it. You don't want to be one of those people where they go into the gym and they go for like the biggest weight.
straight away. There,
Straight away they go for the biggest. They go for step 9 or step 8. Sorry.
Yeah.
They go straight away. They skip all the other steps. They go all the way to step 8. They get absolutely destroyed. They injure themselves or something.
Exactly.
And then they're not even back to square one. They're back to square -5.
Yeah,
whatever.
exactly. And
now they'll
takes
never
them
be able
longer.
to use whatever they've injured. They're never going to be able to use it the
Yeah.
same again. So I think you just need to be sensible about it, really.
And you need to be aware. Obviously, this stuff may be apparent to a lot of people, which I think it will be. But I think what you need to be aware of is you need to walk first before you can run. You need to be able to crawl before you walk, and that's all the stages that we all go through, because we were all once babies. We all had to crawl at one stage to be able to walk, and that's the kind of stuff that I guess this whole cycle teaches us. It's, are you willing to rise to the challenge? And when you do rise to the challenge, are you willing to show the composure in order to go along and take things on the chin along the way? Be independent and show that you're willing to go past these ceilings. Have you seen the film 22 Jump Street?
Yeah.
You know when Channing Tatum talks about breaking through ceilings? That's basically what you have to do. You have to break through the ceilings, right? Surely. And this is what the cycle refers to. There's going to be a lot of steps along the way, but then you're definitely going to learn from it. That's the bottom line. You're going to learn from it. And it's just what, I guess, what personalities people have. It's just you might feel totally comfortable staying in your shell, which is, I think, what we are. I mean, it's sort of going off the cycle now, but that's, I think, what the people around us are encouraging that more and more now.
I think society in general is encouraging. Because that's just easier for society.
I think.
Go on.
Sorry to interrupt you, because
right.
I forgot the point, and I've been thinking about it for ages. But the meeting the mentor part, I think. We said that you can learn from people even if they are negative, but I think another important mentor is other people who are in the same situation. So, I don't know how to give an example without being too dismal. Like, you can say, like, you're at uni, and you think, oh, I'm not making enough friends. But then there might be people who genuinely cannot socialise because of a specific reason. So what I do personally, which is very effective because I have benefited from it a lot. What I do always is I go, there's people who are in a worse situation than me.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, in a life where I'm so privileged, I need to sort of compare myself to those who aren't as privileged, and then that gives me strength, because you want to be stronger because you don't want to complain about the situation you're in. Obviously, it's all independent, so the emotions you feel are independent. You might feel worse about a certain problem or a certain situation. If you're in a certain situation, you might be affected by that more than I would.
Yeah.
Or vice versa. But I think what I do, and I find this the most effective, is I always go, look, there's people who are experiencing things a lot more intensely than I am. Therefore, I don't feel like, I mean, I've spoken about this with a few friends, and they've always said, but at what point do you care for yourself?
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I think I've personally benefited from a lot, where I've benefited a lot from thinking people are having it worse. Therefore, I need to bulk up the courage in order to sort of be. So this is an example, right? When I go to Turkey, and we're on the plane, when I used to go as a child, my dad and my brother would be there. They're both older than me.
Yeah.
And I used to think, okay, I'm not the oldest, therefore I can be scared, right? I'm like, I need to be the child almost, because I'm the youngest. I need to be the child.
Yeah,
but
you kind of fulfill that role.
Exactly. But when I go with just my mum and my sister, I almost become the man. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, I don't know. When you do have to... So I'm scared. Like, on the plane, I'm scared, but my mum and my sister sometimes are more scared than I am because they don't like the takeoff, the landing. And I'm thinking, even though I'm scared, I need to be strong just so I can set an example.
Yeah.
And that's sort of my path of self-development. When I am in a situation where I am almost suffering, I think, okay, what I need to do is compare myself to those who are not as well off as I am, and think, okay, now what I need to do is just be stronger so I can set an example. And I don't know, that can be a subjective thing. People might disagree with that, but that's always how I've been raised, and I found it effective thinking that way. And I think there's a lot of people who do that, and at the same time a lot of people who do the other side. So they want to experience all the emotions in a specific environment where they have to suffer to the max, because they think that's the only way that they can get it off their chest. And I do agree. I think sometimes that is beneficial as well. But for me, what I do is the opposite. So I guess it's just preference. I guess it's just preference on what you want to experience things as. Yeah. So I use the example of being stronger around my family because I had to almost set an example. And I use the example of becoming a man, which obviously is metaphorical. When I say becoming a man, it might sound sexist, but what I mean is just genuinely becoming stronger. So there's examples of this. When I was doing research into the hero's journey, I was listening to videos on YouTube. I was listening to people like Elliot Hulse. I was listening to Jordan Peterson, who talks about it, and reading about Joseph Campbell and his actual teachings. And what I did come across is they use examples of becoming a man it makes sense with the cycle. Yeah. So what they do in Africa is certain tribes, what they would do. I say Africa's a continent. I mean specific countries. I don't know them. I don't know the specific countries, but what they do is they actually send their kids almost out into the wild for them to go from being a boy to a man.
Yeah.
If they can face that challenge and become a man, they go through this cycle and they become a man. They become stronger.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm saying becoming a man we're using as metaphor here, but it's just the idea of becoming stronger. And that's also an example in the film 300. So at a young age, Leonidas has to go out into the wild by himself. He needs to steal, he needs to fight people, and then he kills that wolf. And that's almost him becoming a man.
Yeah,
he becomes stronger.
Yeah.
He becomes so tough that he's no longer a boy. And I guess that's the metaphor that we can use for hero's journey. Once you do learn, once you do go past that threshold, once you do break through that ceiling, you change from being a boy to becoming a man. And that's a definite change. And I guess that's the point where you can go back into your family, if you like, and then you're thinking, well, no, this family still treating me like a boy, whereas I'm a man. And that's an example of the resistance.
That could be an example.
Because I think that resurrection stage can sort of be a bit vague in the way it's described.
Yeah.
But definitely, when you do change, you go back and, like you said, the people don't see you in that box anymore. And that's sort of similar to me when I'm at uni. When I go back home as a smallest child still, I'm still looked after like I am the smallest child, but I'm more than capable of looking after myself. But because parents have
that
the box of you being a child and you being their child, that you can't break through that as because that's the idea they have of you. Yeah,
I think that's a really good point. I think, obviously back in like those ancient times, or even like the tribes you mentioned in Africa and stuff. That's quite a literal, ritualistic approach to, when they strip the kid away and send him to the jungle. Yeah. Obviously, here in the UK, let's say, we don't really get such a obvious example, but it really is kind of the concept of where you jump off a cliff and you learn how to fly on the way down. If you kind of get what I'm saying, it's
wait, give me a second.
You jump off a cliff and you learn how to fly on the way down, or you jump into the water and you learn how to swim, because otherwise you're gonna drown. If you jump off the cliff and you don't learn how to fly, splat, you're dead. So it's kind of where, as humans, the best way we learn is when we got our backs to the wall and we're forced to learn.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that, because I've found that unless I'm in real life situations, I can't give my 100%. Unless I'm under pressure and I have to perform in environments which are replicating the real environment, I can't perform as well. Yeah. So like an example of that, when I used to train for football, I was never as good in training as I was in the actual game, because you have more pressure. You have the pressure of doing well.
Yeah. And
that can be bad for some people because the pressure can
destroy them.
So I guess that's another way of looking at the cycle. If the pressure does get to you, then the cycle probably will have more fluctuations than if you didn't.
Yeah, and I think that's just a problem I think a lot of us face because we're always in that comfort zone. We don't have that sort of pressure. And when you're outside your comfort zone, so let's say, you know, when you move out, let's just say when you move out, you and like you kind of have to supply yourself now, and you kind of have to work yourself. You're gonna find you're a lot more motivated to work and hustle than when you were back at home when your mom and dad did it.
Everything was provided.
Or when
you.
everything was provided for you. Yeah.
Does that happen with you still? So when I go back home, I'm still not motivated to like do shopping or wash up afterwards.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which is quite unfair because I'm more than capable of doing it, but I still expect mum. She's in that box basically. I can't get her out of the box.
It comes back to the box. Yeah. No, honestly, it really is because at the back of our head, we have kind of a lot of us. We have this safety net. And when we have that safety net, you're kind of not really motivated to really give your all. Like you know those I don't know what it's called, but you know when those people walk across those wires, and like they put a wire between here and there.
Oh, okay.
You have to walk across it.
Yeah.
It's like a bar or something.
Oh yeah, of course.
I don't know what it's called. I knew what it was called, but I've forgotten now. But basically,
I don't know.
Let's just say they're gonna be a lot more motivated if there's no safety net.
Exactly.
If there's a safety net there, subconsciously they're gonna be like, all right, it's okay. If I stumble, I'm gonna be caught. But when there's no safety net, that's it. You bet they're gonna give their all.
And that's what I was trying to say. I think when you don't have people who are going to be there for you all the time as a safety net, you learn how to be independent. And you learn how to.
You're forced to learn
through these thresholds by yourself under pressure. And I think that's what is really important about the cycle, because it's very much emphasizing that you should be, with a little bit of aid from this mentor, you should be able to get through this by yourself with inner struggles. And in a struggle, which for Buddha, I think it was quite like a literal inner struggle, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Whereas for others, it may be just be like preparing for a fight, preparing for a football game, preparing for exams, all that kind of stuff. And obviously, I guess exams is quite a good example to use for this, because when you sit an exam, there's no one to help you. There's the lecturers, but besides that, no one can sit the exam with you.
Exactly.
So I think that's probably the most healthy way of going through the cycle. If you think of it as when you go through these periods where you are having to challenge things on your own, that's when you are going to learn most from it, and you won't rely on other people, which in our case is ironic, because I wouldn't have never started the podcast without you, or without anyone. Like I would have always needed someone, whereas
I think that's what you find. That's what you find in life. We're a social species, so we're always gonna kind of grow more when we have others besides us.
Feel better,
we're gonna feel better, and we're gonna feel obviously stronger and more confident. But there is that aspect of because of that, a lot of people find themselves. Again, it relates back to that step 3, the refusal of the call. The reason why a lot of people refuse the call is because they feel like they're too inadequate. They don't have the skills. You know, once I do learn the skill, then I'll do it. Or once I do learn how to podcast, or once I do learn how to, do a certain skill or whatever, then I'll answer the call. But what they find is that time never comes.
Yeah.
And it won't come until you answer the call. Because until you answer the call, you're never going to develop that skill.
I think that's to do with the safety net, though. I think the way we grow up, our parents act very much as a safety net for us. I think what they want to do is they want to make sure we make the least amount of mistakes.
Yeah, and that's just parental instinct. Obviously, they're going to want to be that safety net.
Yeah.
But I feel like sometimes in life... Alright, so basically what happened now is that we kind of got rudely interrupted, if I do say so myself, by someone. The whole building's getting locked up and everything, so we're gonna have to wrap up in the next 5 minutes. I've forgotten what I said.
I also forgot what I said because we were.
Alright, expect the part 2, guys. Expect the part 2 because there's a lot more. I think
sometime in the future. But I guess it's probably best that we ended it here because we were leading on to other points that we could make in the future.
Yeah.
But yeah, we need to do this as fast as possible. So
thank you guys.
It's been a pleasure again. I think. The first podcast was very much just sharing our experiences, but now this is sort of a delve into what our thoughts genuinely are when it comes to matters that relate to everyone. Because uni students, they're just a sort of group, whereas people and self-development, I guess, is just
It
it's
just
what we
relates
can
to
all
everyone.
relate
Yeah,
to.
I think this hero's journey will, no matter who you are, it will resonate you in some way or form. So yeah, I think we just want to thank you guys for
Thank you guys.
again sticking through the whole podcast. If you are still here,
Yeah.
please do like and subscribe if you haven't already. Please do comment as well down below. You know, how do you think this hero's journey relates to you, or you know, have you noticed it in any examples that you have? And if have you agreed or disagreed with some of the points we made? We just want like a general discussion. Basically, we'd love to see comments and then obviously reply to them. So.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully this doesn't look too rough and unrefined when we do edit it, but yeah, unfortunately we are going to have to cut it here. It's been a pleasure. I think the discussions this time have been a lot more in depth than previously. We do like Adil said, if you do leave any comments, that would be muchly appreciated. I do apologise for any coughing or any nose action. Yeah, that's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
All right, take care, guys.